Rachel was the only daughter of her parents, the last child in a struggling family of 3. Her father was a farmer who toiled day and night on the small piece of land he inherited from his father. Her mom was a petty trader who sold vegetables and palm oil at the village markets. Despite their hardships, they had one dream: to see their children get an education. They had managed to send Rachael and her 2 elder brothers to secondary school, but after that, the road ended. There was no money for university, and her brothers had to take up farm work alongside their father. Unlike many young girls in the village who dreamt of escaping to the city, Rachael was different. She chose to stay and help her parents. She cooked, fetched water, washed clothes, and sometimes helped her mother sell at the market. But what really made her stand out was her kindness. If an old woman needed help carrying firewood, Rachael was there. If a child fell and scraped his knee, she would rush to clean the wound. Even when she had nothing to give, she offered smiles and comforting words. One morning, the village woke up to unexpected news. An old woman had returned from the city, looking frail and tattered. It was Madame Cash. Madame Cash, whose real name was Mrs. Agnes, was once the pride of the village. She left for the city decades ago, and over time, stories of her wealth spread. Some villagers said she owned mansions and businesses. Others believed she had abandoned her roots and never cared about her people. But now, she was back, poor, lonely, and struggling. The villagers wasted no time gossiping. She must have gone broke. That's why she's back. Maybe she used her children for money rituals. And now Karma has caught up with her. She never cared for us when she had money. Now she wants help? Let her suffer. Madame Cash, sitting on a small stool outside her old family house, had it all. But she didn't care. She had accepted her fate. What she didn't expect was a complete rejection from everyone. She needed help, someone to fetch water, cook, and assist her with chores. But no one in the village dared to go near her. Even when she asked for a helper, parents warned their children to stay away. Who knows if she's looking for someone to use for sacrifices? And so, Madame Cash struggled alone. One afternoon, Madame Cash decided to go to the market herself. She was weak, but she had no choice. As she dragged herself through the market square, she missed a step and fell hard on the ground. The sharp pain shot through her leg. She groaned, struggling to sit up. The villagers watched from a distance. No one moved. Fear held them back. If she touches me, something bad might happen. Let's see how she gets up on her own. Madame Cash's heart ached, not just from the fall, but from the coldness of the people she once called neighbors. Then suddenly came a voice. Haba, you people are heartless. Can't you help her up? It was Rachael. She rushed to Madame Cash's side and gently lifted her. Mama, are you okay? She asked, dusting off her torn wrapper. Madame Cash was too shocked to speak. Lean on me, I will take you home, ma. With the strength of a determined heart, Rachael helped the old woman to her feet and led her back to her house. When they got there, Madame Cash sat down, staring at Rachael. My child, why did you help me? Aren't you afraid like the others? Rachael smiled. You needed help, Mama. That's all that matters. Tears welled in the old woman's eyes. May God bless you, my daughter. Rachael quickly ran back home, remembering that her mom had sent her to the market for a local seasoning for soup. As soon as she arrived, her mother's voice thundered. Rachael, where have you been? I sent you since. Mama, I'm sorry. I saw Madame Cash fell in the market and nobody wanted to help her, so I took her home. Her mother's face softened, but she sighed. You have a good heart, my daughter, but be careful. This world is wicked. You know people are talking about her, and I don't want anything to happen to you. Rachael nodded, but in her heart, she knew she couldn't abandon Madame Cash. That night, as she lay on her mat, she made a decision. She would care for the old woman, no matter what anyone said. The next morning, after finishing her house chores, Rachael carried a small plate of egusi soup and went to Madame Cash's house. Mama, have you eaten? Madame Cash looked at her with surprise. No, my daughter, I have nothing. Then eat this. Rachael set the plate on a stool. From that day, she made it a habit to visit daily, cooking, fetching water, and cleaning Madame Cash's little house. Madame Cash soon began to look healthier. More than that, she began to smile. One evening, they sat outside, watching the sunset. "My daughter, tell me about your family." Rachael sighed. "We are struggling, Mama, but we are managing." "And your dreams?" "I want to go to the university. I want to be a doctor, but there's no money." Madame Cash listened carefully. Rachael then hesitated before asking, "Mama, why did you come back to the village? People are saying so many things." Madame Cash's face darkened. She waved her hand dismissively. "My child, don't mind them. People will always talk." That night, as Rachael lay in bed, her mother's words echoed in her mind. "This world is wicked. Be careful." Doubt crept into her heart. What if the rumors are true? What if Madame Cash is hiding something? The next day, for the first time, she didn't go to Madame Cash's house. Hours passed, then a day. But as she sat under the mango tree, staring at the sky, something tugged at her heart. What if she's all alone right now? What if she's hungry? And so, she pushed her doubts aside and went back. The moment Madame Cash saw her, she smiled. "I knew you would return, my daughter." Little did Rachael know, her life was about to change forever. Days turned into weeks, and Rachael's routine remained the same. Every morning, after finishing her house chores, she went to Madame Cash's house. She would cook, fetch water, sweep the compound, and keep the old woman company. But the villagers were watching. They gathered in small groups, whispering, shaking their heads. "That girl is playing with fire. She doesn't know what Madame Cash is capable of. One day, we'll wake up and she'll be missing." Some even pitied her. Such a kind girl. If only she knew she was walking into a trap. The gossip reached her mother's ears. "Your daughter is getting too close to that woman." One woman told her, "Have you not heard? She's looking for someone to use for money rituals." Rachel's mom simply sighed. "I hear you, but my daughter is different. She has a good heart, and nothing will happen to her." Inside, she worried, but she trusted her daughter. One evening, as Rachael was returning home from Madame Cash's house, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, and a woman from the village, Mama Kemi, was standing there. "My daughter, listen to me," she whispered urgently. Rachael frowned. "What is it, Mama?" Mama Kemi looked around before speaking. "Run away before it's too late, oh. Madame Cash is up to something. Why do you think nobody is helping her? We have seen this before. First, she pretends to be poor. Then she finds a young girl, takes her in, and before you know it, that girl disappears." Rachel's heart pounded. "Mama, that's not true. Madame Cash is kind. That's what she wants you to think, my dear. You're a good girl. Don't let your kindness kill you." Rachael swallowed hard. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. What if Mama Kemi is right? What if Madame Cash is really dangerous? Again, doubt crawled into her heart. The next morning, Rachael hesitated. She didn't go to Madame Cash's house instead. She tried to convince herself it was the right thing to do. I should stay away, just to be safe. But as the day passed, something tugged at her heart. She's all alone. She has no one else. By afternoon, she made up her mind. She picked up a small bowl of jollof rice and went back to Madame Cash's house. As soon as she arrived, Madame Cash smiled warmly. "Ah, my daughter, I thought you had abandoned me." Rachael swallowed her guilt. "I could never do that, Mama." The old woman reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "You are different, my child. You have a heart of gold." Months passed, and Rachel's bond with Madame Cash grew stronger. But one afternoon, something happened that changed everything. They had just finished eating when an exotic car pulled up in front of Madame Cash's small house. The car was sleek, black, and expensive. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Who could this be? The door opened slowly, and a young man stepped out. He was tall, handsome, and dressed in designer clothes. Rachel's eyes widened. The man walked in and prostrated flat before Madame Cash. "Mom, good afternoon." Madame Cash's eyes filled with tears. "Tony, my son." Rachel gasped. Her son? Tony looked around, shocked by the sight of his mother's poor living condition. "Mom, why? Why are you here suffering when you have a mansion in the city?" Madame Cash smiled. "Tony, I had my reasons. Rachel stood frozen, unable to believe her ears. Madam Cash is not poor? She has a mansion? Dad, why was she living like this? Before she could process her thoughts, Madam Cash turned to her. Come, my daughter, let me introduce you. She smiled. Tony, this is Rachael, the only person in this village who showed me kindness. Tony turned to Rachael, his eyes filled with gratitude. You took care of my mother when nobody else would. Thank you so much. Rachael sat frozen, trying to process what was happening. Tony, the rich, handsome young man standing before her, was Madam Cash's son, the woman she had been taking care of for months, whom the entire village believed to be poor, was actually wealthy beyond imagination. How is this possible? She thought. Tony, still kneeling before his mother, spoke softly. Mom, please. Whatever reason you have for coming back to the village, I respect it, but now it's time to go home. You don't belong here like this. Madam Cash sighed and shook her head. Tony, you have always been a good son, but before I leave, I must fulfill my purpose. She turned to Rachael, who was still trying to comprehend everything. My child, you must be wondering why a woman as rich as I am chose to live like a beggar. Rachael nodded slowly. I won't keep you in suspense any longer. Madam Cash continued. She took a deep breath and smiled. I was looking for something money cannot buy. Rachael frowned. What do you mean, Mama? Madam Cash leaned forward. I have lived in wealth for years. I have seen the way people treat the rich with fake love, pretentious kindness, and greed. When you have money, it is hard to know who truly cares for you. Rachael listened, her heart pounding. I came back to this village and disguised myself as a poor, abandoned woman to see if there was still genuine kindness left in this world. And do you know what I found? She took Rachael's hand in hers. I found you. Rachael's breath hissed. Me? Madam Cash nodded. Yes, you. When everyone else turned their backs, you helped me. You cooked for me. You cared for me. You stood by me, expecting nothing in return. Rachael's heart stopped. She turned sharply to Madam Cash. Mama, are you saying? Madam Cash smiled. Yes, my daughter. I came here looking for someone with a pure heart, and that person is you. Rachael's eyes widened. Me? But I never did anything for you because I wanted a reward. I just wanted to help. Madam Cash smile deepened. And that, my child, is exactly why you are the one. Rachael felt dizzy. This was too much. She had only wanted to help an old woman in need. How did she end up in a story that felt like something out of a fairy tale? Madam Cash continued. Before I leave this village, I want to give you something, my dear. Rachael frowned. Mama, please. You don't need to give me anything. I didn't help you because I wanted payment. Madam Cash laughed. I know, my daughter. That is why I want to help you. You told me you wanted to become a medical doctor, didn't you? Rachael's eyes widened. Yes, but no buts. I am sending you to school. You will get the education you deserve, fully paid for by me. Rachael gasped. Her entire life, she had given up on the dream of going to school. And now, out of nowhere, she was being offered the opportunity of a lifetime. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Mama, I don't know what to say. Madam Cash wiped her tears. Say yes, my daughter. Say yes and let your life begin. That evening, Rachael rushed home with her heart racing. She burst into the house, breathless. Mama, Papa, she called out. Her mother rushed out from the kitchen. Rachael, what is it? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Her father walked in from outside, his face full of concern. What happened, my daughter? Rachael dropped to her knees, trying to catch her breath. Mama, Papa, you won't believe what just happened. Her parents exchanged glances. Talk, my daughter, her father urged. Rachael took a deep breath. Madam Cash is not poor. She's actually a billionaire. Her mother staggered back. What? And she has offered to send me to university. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Jesus! Are you serious? Her father's eyes filled with tears. This is a miracle. Her mother grabbed her hands. My daughter, we told you before. When you do good, you will find good. The entire family knelt down and gave thanks to God. By the next morning, the news had spread rapidly. Villagers whispered in shock. Did you hear? Madam Cash is actually still rich, oh, and she's taking Rachael to the city. That girl is lucky. But some were ashamed. We judged that woman wrongly. Rachael was the only one who showed that kindness, and now, look at her reward. Many shook their heads in regret. As Rachael packed her few belongings, preparing to leave for the city, people came to congratulate her, but she only smiled. It was never about the reward, she told them. It was about doing the right thing. The next day, Rachael, Madam Cash, and Tony left for the city. As they drove into town, Rachael's mouth fell open. Huge buildings, shiny cars, bright lights, and then they arrived at Madam Cash's mansion. The gates opened to reveal a breathtaking compound with a fountain, flower gardens, and a house that looked like something out of a dream. This is where I'll be living, Rachael thought, her heart racing. That night, she couldn't sleep. Why did Madam Cash go through all this trouble? Why disguise herself as a poor woman? Finally, she gathered the courage to ask. Madam Cash smiled and told her the full story. I wanted to find a woman truly worthy of my son. Someone who would love and care for people without expecting money in return. You, Rachael, had that person. Rachael sat in silence, overwhelmed. She looked at Tony, who smiled warmly. Take your time, he said softly. There is no pressure. For the first time in her life, Rachael felt something she had never felt before. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The days that followed felt like a dream for Rachael. She had gone from struggling in a small village to living in a mansion in one of the most beautiful parts of the city. Everything was different. The house had more rooms than she could count. The food was unlike anything she had ever eaten before. The air smelled of wealth and comfort. But despite all the luxury, Rachael remained the same humble girl from the village. Every morning, she still woke up early to help in the kitchen, even though Madam Cash had housemaids. Rachael, my dear, you don't need to stress yourself, Madam Cash told her one day. But Rachael simply smiled. Mama, I can't change who I am. Madam Cash watched her with pride. That is exactly why I chose you. Tony, on the other hand, had begun to spend more time with her. At first, it was simple things, showing her around the house, helping her adjust to city life. But soon, they began to talk. Rachael discovered that Tony wasn't just a rich woman's son. He was kind, intelligent, and funny. They talked about their dreams, their struggles, their fears. Rachael told him about her life in the village, how she always dreamed of education and caring for people as a doctor. Tony listened. You're one of the strongest women I've ever met, he told her one day. And just like that, a friendship was born. But deep down, something else was growing. One evening, Madam Cash called Rachael into the sitting room. She handed her a large brown envelope. Rachael opened it and gasped. It was an admission letter from a prestigious university. You're officially a medicine student, my dear, Madam Cash announced. Tears rolled down Rachael's cheek. Mama, I don't know how to thank you. Madam Cash pulled her into a warm hug. Just promise me one thing. Never stop being the kind-hearted girl that you are. Rachael nodded. I promise, Mama. As weeks passed, Rachael became part of the family. Madam Cash treated her like a daughter. Tony became her closest friend, and even though she had everything she could ever ask for, she never let the world change her. She still spoke to her parents in the village every week, and Madam Cash sent them money regularly. Soon, construction began on a new house for her family in the village. The news spread quickly. Did you hear? Rachel's family is now rich. That girl's kindness changed her destiny. But Rachael never let any of it get to her head. She remained the same humble, kind-hearted girl she had always been. As the months passed, something began to shift between Rachael and Tony. Their conversation grew longer, their laughter became softer, and whenever their hands accidentally brushed, something unspoken passed between them. One evening, they sat outside under the stars, talking about their dreams. Tony turned to her. Rachael, do you ever think about love? Rachael smiled shyly. Of course, I believe love should be built on friendship first. Tony's heart pounded. And do you think two people from different worlds can truly fall in love? Rachael frowned, confused. What do you mean? Tony hesitated, then sighed. Never mind, let's go inside. But that night, both of them lay awake, thinking about the same thing. Rachael had grown into a brilliant medical student. She was doing well in school, making her family proud. She had become even more beautiful, her confidence glowing. But there was something more. Her bond with Tony had deepened. One evening, under the soft glow of the city lights, Tony finally confessed his feelings. Rachael, I don't want to wait any longer. Rachael's heart raced. Wait for what? Tony took her hands in his. I love you, Rachael. I have loved you since the day I set my eyes on you. Rachael's breath caught. Tony, are you serious? Are you sure? Tony nodded. I have never been more sure about anything in my life. It's not just because my mother chose you. I choose you too. Tears filled Rachael's eyes. I love you too. And just like that, the friendship that had started with simple conversations turned into a love story meant to last forever. Years had passed since Rachael's life changed forever. She had grown from a simple village girl into a confident, brilliant young woman. She was now in her final year in school, preparing to graduate. Her family in the village no longer struggled. Their new house was completed, and her father's farm had expanded. Thanks to Madam Cash's generosity, everything seemed perfect, but there was one more chapter to be written. One evening, Tony invited Rachael to dinner at a beautiful rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The lights sparkled like stars, and a soft breeze filled the air. Rachael smiled as she looked around. Tony, this place is beautiful. Tony chuckled. Not as beautiful as you. Rachael blushed. As they ate, Tony seemed nervous. His hands kept fidgeting, and his eyes kept stealing glances at her. Finally, he took a deep breath and stood up. Rachael, there's something I need to say. She looked up, confused. Then, to her shock, he got down on one knee. Gasps filled the restaurant. Rachael's hand flew to her mouth. Tony, what are you doing? Tony smiled, his eyes full of love. From the moment I met you, I knew you were special. You weren't just kind. You were selfless. You changed my mother's life. And in doing so, you changed mine. Rachael's eyes filled with tears. Tony, I have loved you for a long time, Rachael. And now, I don't want to wait anymore. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? Tears rolled down Rachael's cheeks. She looked around, at the people watching, at the man kneeling before her, at the diamond ring sparkling in his hands. And then, she looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man she loved. There was no doubt in her heart. Yes, I will marry you. The restaurant erupted into cheers as Tony slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a tight embrace. Their journey had been unexpected, but fate had brought them together, and now they were destined to be stronger forever. The wedding was like a fairy tale. Guests came from far and wide, including top city officials, celebrities, and the entire village. People from the village couldn't believe their eyes. Is this really the same Rachael we used to see in the market? Her kindness brought her to this moment. Madam Cash beamed with pride as she watched her son and the girl she had chosen stand before the altar, ready to become husband and wife. This is the moment I waited for, she whispered, as Rachael and Tony exchanged vows. Tears filled many eyes. She had gone from poor village girl to the wife of a billionaire son. But more than that, she had found love, happiness, and fulfillment. When the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride," Tony leaned in and kissed Rachael, sealing their love in front of the world. Cheers filled the air, and just like that, Rachael's journey of kindness, patience, and love led her to the life she never dreamed possible. And Madam Cash, she finally retired, knowing her mission was complete. One evening, as she sat in her garden, Tony and Rachael came to sit beside her. "Mama," Rachael said, resting her head on her shoulder. "Yes, my daughter. Thank you for everything." Madam Cash smiled. "No, my child. Thank you for proving that there is still true kindness in this world." And so, the girl who once had nothing gained everything, not just wealth, but love, family, and purpose, all because of one simple act of kindness. This story beautifully shows that kindness always comes back in ways we least expect. Rachel never sought a reward, but because of her selfless heart, she found love, happiness, and success. I hope the story touched your heart the way it was meant to. Thanks for always watching. If you like this, you will like the next one. Click to watch it now. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.